So the man had not cut his hair, had not shaved his beard in years. The men in the fishing boat fished him out of the sea, pulled him in. He had a wild, crazy look on his face. In the background, you can see the outlines of the Chateau d'If, the famous French island prison, the Alcatraz of its day. Now, he would have scared anybody, and even the fishermen were a bit alarmed by his look. I want to read to you the exchange that followed pulling him out of the sea. "Hello, what's the matter at the Chateau d'If?" exclaimed the captain. A small white cloud crowned the summit of the bastion of the Chateau d'If. At the same moment, the faint report of a gun was heard. Then all the sailors looked at one another. "A prisoner has escaped from the Chateau d'If, and they are firing the alarm gun," Dantes said calmly. Dantes was the wild-looking man. "What is the day of the month?" he presently asked Jacopo, the sailor who had saved him and who now sat beside him. "The 28th of February. "What year?" "Have you forgotten that you ask such a question?" "I was so frightened last night," replied Dantes with a smile, "that I've almost lost my memory. What year is it?" "The year 1829, replied Jacopo. It was 14 years to the very day since Dantes' arrest. He was 19 when he entered the Chateau d'If. He was 33 when he escaped. A sad smile passed over his lips. He wondered what had become of Mercedes, who must now believe him dead. Then his eyes flashed with hatred as he thought of the three men to whom he owed so long and so cruel a captivity: Danglars, Fernand, Villefort. Against them he renewed the oath of implacable vengeance he had vowed in his dungeon. You no doubt have already recognized the broad outlines of the 19th century novel by Alexandre Dumas, The Count of Monte Cristo. It's a fascinating novel. It's a great movie, but a better book. It tells the story of Dantes, Edmond Dantes, whose life was beautiful. He was in love with Mercedes. The future was his. Life was good. And then his three foes, for different reasons, Villefort, Caderousse, and Mondego, said, we have to do him in. As a result of that, he spends all those years, 14 years, in the Chateau d'If. It is there that he encounters the priest, the Abbé Faria, the priest who is so well educated that over the years as they develop, he begins to educate Dantes, educate him in history and in literature and in mathematics and certainly in theology. And it is on that last one that they come to the core of their conversation. Dantes, who begins to burn with vengeance, vengeful thoughts. And the Abbé who says to him, leave vengeance to God. It is in that exchange that the priest reveals something to Dantes about where a fabulous treasure can be found. Through a set of circumstances, Dantes escapes, finds the fabulous treasure, becomes wealthy beyond imagination, and transforms himself from Edmond Dantes to the Count of Monte Cristo. Now he has the power, now he has the wealth, now he has the ability to bring about the vengeance that is required in his heart. So I listened to the novel, didn't read it, listened to it. This was years ago. It was a lot of hours of riding my bike, working in the yard, cleaning the garage. 52 hours is the length of the novel. I listened to it, and I remember going through that roller coaster of emotions that when he comes out and transforms himself, and now his sights are set on two things: rewarding those who had helped him and his aging father, and wreaking special vengeance on those who were the cause of his downfall. I'll never forget, I was in the backyard working in the rose garden area when he finally brought the first vengeance to a conclusion, the most horrific vengeance on this enemy. And at the end of which, when now it has happened, he only utters two words: "That's one." And I'm listening to this and I'm like, yes. And then I'm thinking, wait a second, you're a pastor. What are you doing celebrating this vengeance? But I have to admit, by then, the story was coursing through my veins. Because there's just something about making things right. Isn't there? There's another man. Similar story. Done in by people he thought was his friend, thought were his friends. Done in for years. The best we can tell, about 13 years of his life, in essence, disappeared between slavery and service and, well, not being able to disclose who he is. 13 years. We have followed the outlines of his story to this moment. Today is the day when from the pit of prison, things will change. And our question is, when things change, when you have the power at your beck and call, when you have the finances, the wealth that you could only have dreamed of. Now, what kind of person are you? Will you live to wreak vengeance? Will you live for the good of others? Joseph is his name. Story is told in Genesis. We go to chapter 41 of Genesis this morning. We just read the first few words of the first verse. When 2 full years had passed, Pharaoh had a dream. 10 words. When 2 full years had passed, Joseph is in prison during this time. When 2 full years had passed, Pharaoh had a dream. That sets the stage. That tells us, the narrator is indicating something's about to change, something's about to happen. Pharaoh had a dream. Now, Pharaoh was believed to be divine. So it's rather curious that he has this dream, but he can't interpret it. Through a set of circumstances of somebody that he had known in prison, somebody in Pharaoh's court says, I know the man who can interpret it. And so now Joseph reappears on the scene. Genesis 41, verse 9, then the chief cupbearer said to Pharaoh, today I'm reminded of my shortcomings. Pharaoh was once angry with his servants, and he imprisoned me and the chief baker in the house of the captain of the guard. Each of us had a dream the same night, and each dream had a meaning of its own. Now a young Hebrew was there with us, a servant of the captain of the guard. We told him our dreams, and he interpreted them for us, giving each man the interpretation of his dream. And things turned out exactly as he interpreted them to us. I was restored to my position, and the other man was impaled. So Pharaoh sent for Joseph, and he was quickly brought from the dungeon. When he had shaved and changed his clothes, he came before Pharaoh. Pharaoh said to Joseph, I had a dream. No one can interpret it, but I've heard it said of you that when you hear a dream, you can interpret it. I cannot do it, Joseph replied to Pharaoh, but God will give Pharaoh the answer he desires. Can you picture it? He's in the dungeon. He hears them coming down the hallway, the clank of keys. His cell is open. Come with us, Joseph. This was either really good news or really bad news. Turns out it's good. He shaves, which likely means that in the style of the Egyptians of that day and time. He would have completely shaved his head, completely shaved his beard, would have dressed in a certain type of tunic, and would have looked utterly Egyptian. Joseph, when I see you like that, even your family wouldn't know you if they saw you. And then he stands before Pharaoh. From prison to the palace. Now, about 2/3 of this chapter is taken up with the exchange between Pharaoh and Joseph. A lot of narrative. It's very common in Old Testament narrative. If you want to understand the story and you want to capture its meaning, pay attention to the narrative. Pay attention to the dialogue, to what the different characters and personalities say. So Pharaoh tells him the 2 dreams. He says 2 dreams. First one, fat cows, 7 of them. 7 skinny cows. Ate the fat cows. No change. I woke up. Second dream, 7 full heads of grain, 7 wizened, wasted heads of grain. And then the same thing happened, and again, no change. What do they mean? What am I to make of this? Says Pharaoh. How am I to understand it? And Joseph tells him very simply, 2 dreams means this is settled. God's going to make it happen. Count on it. 7 years, and then 7 years. 7 years of plenty, 7 years of famine. In other words, the future's coming. You're going to enjoy it. It's going to be wonderful. It's going to make people think, eat, drink, and be merry. Everything is coming up roses, but get ready. Because at the end of those 7 years, you're going to need every last kernel of grain you can save. So find someone wise to help you prepare. Verse 33, Joseph's words, and now let Pharaoh look for a discerning and wise man and put him in charge of the land of Egypt. Let Pharaoh appoint commissioners over the land to take 1/5 of the harvest of Egypt during the 7 years of abundance. They should collect all the food of these good years that are coming and store up the grain under the authority of Pharaoh to be kept in the cities for food. This food should be held in reserve for the country to be used during the 7 years of famine that will come upon Egypt, so that the country may not be ruined by the famine. Get ready, Pharaoh. God has set things. It's going to happen. Find a wise man. I don't know. Do you wonder? You wonder what's going on in Joseph's mind? Is he trying to raise his hand? The text doesn't say. He would have had reason to do that back in his father's household. He was the favored, the preferred, the spoiled brat. But life and experience and years have broken him. It is most likely now that he stands there with true humility and just says, I'm just warning you and advising you, this is the direction to take. Verse 39, then Pharaoh said to Joseph, since God has made all this known to you, there is no one so discerning and wise as you. You shall be in charge of my palace, and all people are to submit to your orders. Only with respect to the throne will I be greater than you. So Pharaoh said to Joseph, I hereby put you in charge of the whole land of Egypt. Then Pharaoh took his signet ring from his finger and put it on Joseph's finger. He dressed him in robes of fine linen, put a gold chain around his neck. He had him ride in a chariot as his second in command, and people shouted before him, make way. Then he put him in charge of the whole land of Egypt. Then Pharaoh said to Joseph, I am Pharaoh, but without your word, no one will lift hand or foot in all the land of Egypt. Pharaoh gave Joseph the name Zaphenath-Paneah and gave him Asenath, daughter of Potiphar, a priest of On, to be his wife. And Joseph went throughout the land of Egypt. Joseph was 30 years old when he entered the service of Pharaoh, king of Egypt. And Joseph went out from Pharaoh's presence and traveled throughout Egypt. What happens to somebody when suddenly, in one fell swoop, the world is their oyster? Complete power. More wealth than we can process. That's enough to kill many people. Kill them spiritually, relationally, a healthy sense of self. I look at what happens in athletics in our world. Someone has said we pay people in inverse proportion to their value to society. We pay teachers down here, and up here we pay people who can put a ball through a hoop or kick it through some uprights. And I've wondered, you have these young people coming out of college, 22, 23 years old. Joseph isn't that much older, he's 30. And suddenly, everything is theirs. Some people say, when you fail, when everyone abandons you, when everything goes badly, then you know who you really are. And I think there's truth to that. But I would suggest to you, when you have it all, then we know who you really are. Then I know who I really am. It's curious that in the book of Proverbs, there's a proverb that says that gold is tested by fire. When the fire burns and the gold is placed in it, it melts out the impurities. Now you see the gold for what it really is. It says, gold is tested by fire, but people are tested by praise. Not when they're putting you down, but when they're praising you. Who are you now? Joseph, who are you? Will you live for the good of others? Or will you turn your ire on those responsible for your suffering? I mean, think about it. If you had the power, there's this little paperback book called The Book of Questions. So all it is questions. Questions for groups, small groups, sitting around the fire on a winter evening with a family, just reading questions, answering questions. And one of those questions goes something like this. If you had the ability, and no one would ever know about it, to ruin someone that has hurt you, would you do it? Nobody would ever know. Except you. You have the ability. Joseph, it doesn't matter if people know or not. You have the world by the tail. You can do what you will. What kind of person are you? I read just the other day, that when somebody upsets you, it takes 42 muscles in your face to frown. It said it only takes 4 muscles to lift your arm and slap them upside the head. 4 muscles. Isn't that what a lot of us would like to? We usually can contain it. We usually don't actually do it, but we'd like to get back. To even things out, to settle the score. It happens with the youngest of children, and it never quite disappears, never fully goes away. So, Joseph, will you be Edmond Dantes, the Count of Monte Cristo, or someone else? Something else. Verse 50. Before the years of famine came, 2 sons were born to Joseph by Asenath, daughter of Potiphar, firstborn. Joseph named his firstborn Manasseh and said, "It is because God has made me forget all my trouble and all my father's household." The second son he named Ephraim, and said, "It is because God has made me fruitful in the land of my suffering." Remember, in Scripture, names are deeply important because they describe profound realities about the one being named, about the one doing the naming, about the family. What Joseph is saying here, if I could put it into our vernacular, when his first son is born, he names him in a way that says, God has allowed the past to be the past. I will no longer be dominated by the suffering, by the heartaches, by the sorrow of the past. And when the second one is born, he says, there is a future of hope, a future of fruitfulness. God has allowed me to see something better than what I had. My question when I read that is, Joseph, how could you have that kind of a perspective? How? How's it possible that you are in these verses, by what you name your sons, making it clear that I'm moving forward, I'm leaving the past behind, and I'm stepping into the future? How is that possible? I think this chapter tells us. I think this chapter makes clear how that's possible. And it's possible because of how Joseph understands life. So I want you to notice several verses peppered through this chapter. Joseph is speaking, and he's giving us an insight into how he is able to focus on the future and not be consumed by revenge over the past. So notice the verses. 16. This is when Pharaoh's wanting info about the dreams. I cannot do it, Joseph replied to Pharaoh, but God will give Pharaoh the answer he desires. Verse 25, then Joseph said to Pharaoh, the dreams of Pharaoh are one and the same. God has revealed to Pharaoh what he is about to do. Verse 28, it is just as I said to Pharaoh, God has shown Pharaoh what he is about to do. And then coming back to those verses we read about his sons, verse 51, Joseph named his firstborn Manasseh and said, it is because God has made me forget all my trouble and all my father's household. Verse 52, the second son he named Ephraim and said, it is because God has made me fruitful in the land of my suffering. In other words, step by step, all along the way, at the key moments of all that happens throughout this chapter, Joseph keeps turning the spotlight onto God, and he keeps saying, it's God, it's God, it's God, it's God. In other words, in the midst of a life that has taken a dramatic, a dastardly turn, he's keenly aware of God. I want to say, Joseph, how is that possible? How can you see God in the midst of all this catastrophe? How? The only thing I can conclude is because of one thing. It's because Joseph has concluded that God does not waste anything. God does not waste anything. Because when you read the story of Joseph and you have this gap in his life of, as far as we can tell, about 13 years, where everything from our human perspective is horrible, we want to look at that, and over those years, we want to write the title, The Wasted Years. A servant in Egypt, a prisoner in prison, and unjustly accused. We want to say, total waste. I followed and watched and read some of the stories about prisoners who have been unjustly convicted. And then yet through innocence projects, they have been found to be not only not guilty, but innocent, and have been set free. And I have been particularly stunned by certain ones who have emerged years later and said, I'm not going back. God is with me. My eye is on the future. I think, how can you do that? All these wasted years. That's my question for Joseph. How can you do that? Oh, Edmond Dantes was clear. You give me the money, you give me the freedom, you give me the power, transform me into the Count of Monte Cristo and Danglars, Villefort, Caderousse. Hell is coming your way. I will wreak vengeance. Forget what the Abbé Faria said about God being the one to do that. I will be the one to do it, and I'll do it to you, and I'll do it in the most dastardly ways. That's not Joseph. Because Joseph has somehow learned that lesson that God does not waste anything. God is like the Native American. I read that when the Native American killed the buffalo, she used it all. The horns, the hoofs, the pelt, the skin, the meat, used it all. But that when the white settler came, when the white hunter came, they just wantonly slaughtered them by the thousands, the tens, the hundreds of thousands, leaving their bones to bleach in the prairie sun. Waste and destruction. The Native American using everything. That's God. God uses everything in your life and mine that from our perspective can look good sometimes and bad many times. God is not wasting it. Just think about it. If you just peruse the pages of this book, you will come upon someone like Elijah who suddenly bursts center stage of Israel's history. No rain except at my word, and then disappears for years of what? Sitting. Just sitting. What are you doing, God? You're wasting his life. But if you study his story, God is working on him so he can work through him. It's not wasted. Moses, I'll do what needs to be done to get these people out of Egypt, takes it into his own hands, and as a result of that, 40 years, 4 decades of following sheep around a wilderness, a wasted life. Not with God. The best is yet to come. Paul, struck blind by the fiery light from heaven and the voice that speaks to him, turning his life in a new direction. What happens? He spent years in the Arabian desert getting his head right, getting his soul right, getting his heart right with God before he emerges and becomes the firebrand for God that will change the trajectory of Jewish-Christian relations. Jesus. You have this to-do list dominated by one thing: save the world. Just that. Save the world. Reveal God in such a way that it will be so transformative that some can't take it. They'll kill you over it, but you will save the world. That's your job, Jesus. And what does he do? 30 years in obscurity. We know almost nothing about those 30 years. Nothing. Here, there, a story or two. Wasted time for us. God wastes nothing. I had a teacher, Christian ministry class, Rob Shepard in college. He overheard us one day talking about, what do we have to take? What do I need college algebra for? I'm going to be preaching about college algebra. English lit, you kidding me? History of Western Civ, well, that's a nap in the afternoon. Why do I need these classes? And Dr. Shepard listened to us, and he said, if you will pay attention, if you will learn, you will find that many times things, opportunities will come that will allow you to use things you have learned all over for the kingdom. He was saying God wastes nothing. We didn't get it at the time. I've often wished I had. My college jobs, shipping clerk at a bookstore, roofing, digging ditches, framing. Those summers were wonderful impetus to go back to college, to get a degree. But do you know that some of the lessons I learned there have continued to echo in my life to this very day? They were not wasted years. I'll never forget. When I was teaching here, first year med student class, religion class, orientation to religion and medicine, a religion faculty and 3 or 4 physicians came together. We did it in a team format. I remember one day after the class, a young student, first year student, was talking to one of my medical colleagues, bright physician. And she was saying to this physician, she said, "I'm so happy to be here, just so happy to be here. College was just a waste. I'm just so excited now to really be in what matters." And I was curious what this physician, you know what this physician said? She looked at that student. I couldn't believe it. And this is pretty close to a verbatim quote. She looked at her and she said, "That's horrible. College was your education. This is just vocational training." I thought, boy, if I'd have said that, it wouldn't have gone well. But this physician said, those were not wasted years. You were learning, growing. That's what it appears that Joseph has learned. God does not waste anything. Now, understand what that means. What that means is this. If you look back over these years and you view them as wasted years, and now you have the ability, either by position or power or money or whatever it is, now you have the ability to change things. If all of this was wasted, now your focus is on making it right, getting mine, and taking care of me. That becomes automatically what you have to do. That's Edmond Dantes, the Count of Monte Cristo. But when you look back on that from the divine perspective and you realize as hellish as that was, as challenging as it was, as hurtful as it was, it has not been wasted because God has been at work. Do you know what that does? That sets you free to live for others, to live for the good of others. You don't have a score to settle. God has or God will take care of that. He may do it through you. He may do it through someone else. But you can live in the light of the fact that God wastes nothing. And because He doesn't, I will have to trust Him with some of the situations and circumstances of my life. And one of the ways I manifest that trust is I reach out to do good for those around me, which is exactly what happens in the life of Joseph. From this point forward, his life now turns in the direction that he will ultimately feed large portions of the then known world in times of famine. His whole life turns toward the direction of caring for, of serving others, because he sees it from the divine perspective and he understands God wastes nothing. I don't know what you're going through. Could be you're waiting for that letter, that email that says, congratulations, you have been accepted, and it's not coming. It hasn't come for a time or two, a cycle or two, and now you're feeling desperate. Don't let your dream die. That's not what I'm saying. But what I am saying is trust the divine perspective. If you will allow God to continue to work in you, He's not wasting things. They will be used for a redemptive purpose. If you've had a relationship in which you've invested 3, 4, 5 years of your life blow up and end, you think, those are all wasted years. What am I going to do now? Remember Joseph. God is at work. Remember what he said? God did it. He's aware of God's presence all through it all. Remember that God does not waste anything. Trust it to Him. Whatever your situation, whatever your circumstance, if you just continue to place it before God and ask Him, work in me, Lord. Do with me as you will. Work on me so that you can then work through me. you may discover the exact lesson Joseph discovered. And when he discovered it, what it meant for him is now I don't have to live all about me. Now I can focus out on other people. I don't know that this is captured better than in the prayer of St. Francis. Prayer of St. Francis, a well-known prayer, but a prayer worth learning, worth listening to, worth praying every single day of our lives. Here's what it says. Lord, make me an instrument of your peace. Where there is hatred, let me sow love. Where there is injury, pardon. Where there is doubt, faith. Where there is despair, hope. Where there is darkness, light. Where there is sadness, joy. O divine Master, grant that I may not so much seek to be consoled as to console, to be understood as to understand, to be loved as to love. For it is in giving that we receive. It is in pardoning that we are pardoned. And it is in dying that we are born to eternal life. That, my friends, that is the way to live life for the good of others.